Hi, this is my first devlog. I'm creating a game using the Rust programming language and the Godot game engine. I want these videos to be more than just the progress of my game. I want them to be useful to other people as well. Therefore, I'm going to focus on one or more topics for each video. I want to focus on two topics for today's video: getting Rust running in the Godot game engine and creating a custom shader to have a swappable palette for the player characters, so loot and various equipment can affect the way the player looks. On my screen you can see the URL for a blog post I've wrote showing how to get up and running with Godot and the Rust language. So the first thing I'm going to do is bootstrap my Rust code with the GD native stuff. And I'm going to create a game world object. We're making a node 2D object because this is going to be a 2D pixel art game. And we don't need that, and we don't need that. And we are going to import a shortcut I made for Godot print and an extension trait I made for the input event, so I can check if the key was pressed without having to type all that out every time. I simply call pressed. So this works for 90% of all my use cases. So if event is UI console, meaning the escape key was pressed, then we will get the tree, which returns an option, exit code 0, and let's say that. Okay, and then I need to obviously add the game world to this handle, otherwise it won't be available in Godot. What am I missing? Okay, and I haven't done my hello world either, so let's do that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, if this builds, it did, is go to Godot and see if we can add this game world struct to a node. Start Godot with the editor, create a 2D scene. I'm going to call this game world. I'm going to try to call this game world. This does not have to have the same name as the struct, but the class name does. Game world. It's a native script, and the library we're going to use is this GDNlib. Now, how to set this up is what I wrote about on my blog post. As you can see here, I'm using 64-bit Linux XL11 for my project. Okay, we're going to save that, and then we can run this, and we can see our hello world down here. And if I press escape, it quits. Okay, that's grand. Let's quit out of that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a... oh, look at that. I'm going to add a player class or player struct so we can interact with a player object. And this is going to be player, and that will be an animated sprite. You know what? It's going to be a kinematic body 2D. So it's going to be. And then we need to import that. We need to import a bunch of things because of the macros. We could do this and import everything, but we don't really need everything. So I'm going to do that. And kinematic body 2D as well as input event. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the class here. There we go. So now we have a player. We don't need that anymore. We can get rid of that as well. And we'll keep the quit. And let's do nothing with this yet. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the actual player. So we're going to open the editor for the game world. And we'll add a kinematic body 2D. And on top of that, we're going to add an animated sprite. And we're going to add a collision object. We'll do collision shape 2D. And for now, we're just going to add a rectangle. We're just doing this to silence the warnings. We don't have the sprite loaded just yet, so that's the next thing we're going to do. And I've created the sprite for this already. So now I'm just going to import that. Right, so now these are now available in the assets directory here. Here is my rather zombie-esque looking player sprite. So let's add him to the animated sprite. Use sprite frames. I'm going to call this run left. Now, that's a player, and it's 1 vertical, 5 horizontal. Select all and add. And if we now zoom in, we can see our player here. But as you can see, he's very fussy. So we're going to change our import to disable the filter, re-import that, and now he's looking the way he should. We're going to do the same thing for our base palette. And filter, re-import. Okay, because otherwise the colors would be all kinds of messed up. So now we're going to get to write in the actual shader. So we're going to select our animated sprite, go to material, new shader material, new shader, and there we go. It's a shame that I can't write shader code in Vim, but I'll show you why. And it's a fragment shader. And I've done something wrong, have I? No? Okay, that's great. So if I now go and look at the actual code that was generated here, you can see that the shader code is actually inside the resource. So we can't really use another editor unless we close down Godot, but that's just silly for this. Okay, so let's see what we need. We need to take some input. We need to take a new texture as a shader parameter, so we can swap this through code. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the color for the pixel, and we're going to, now we have to, well, that has to go in the actual shade, the fragment shade. There we go, the fragment function. And let's see, so we're going to do a uniform sampler 2D, and we're going to call this palette and hint albedo. So that now creates this shader parameter here, so we can add our base palette in there. Okay, right, so we got the color. The next thing we want is the I haven't actually talked about how I'm doing this. Okay, so let me bail out of this and open up a sprite editor instead. Here is our rather zombie-esque looking player character, and here is the base palette I'm going to use for this character. And these pixels, where they are placed in this sprite, is determining what index they are, and we're going to use that to match the red color value of the player sprite. If we look at this one, we can see that the red color value is 0, so it's going to get the first pixel as its color value. we can see that the hair has a red value of 1, so it gets the second one, right? And it doesn't really matter what any of the other values are. We're only looking at the red value on the character. Okay. Right, so back into Godot. So we were writing a shader. There we go. Okay, so this will give us the color of a pixel, and we can check the color red value. So to get the index from the new palette, we can say that we have a new vector where we're looking at the red color for the X value, and we're going to use 0 for the Y value because this is only 1 pixel high. Okay. Next up, we need to get the actual color. So we do the same thing we did for our color on line 5, except we're using the new palette and we're using the index. So now we have the new color value, and then finally we're just gonna mix these colors. Oh, there's no vec 5. And then we say that the color of this pixel is actually what final is. Now he's completely white because there is no color because we haven't assigned a palette. But if I do assign a palette, hopefully, there we go. And now we can animate this guy as well. Okay, let's hide that thing so we can actually see this better. If I were to create individual sprites instead for various parts that can change color, this would be really tedious because you'd have to create an individual body, individual legs, and animating them would be a nightmare. So I think this is a lot easier to do this way. We're going to increase the FPS to maybe 11. There we go. It's jogging along. Okay, but we're not done yet. Now, the goal of this is actually to have this change color through code. So we can code up a jacket and set the color values on that and assign those color values when the player equips the jacket. So we can bail out of Godot for now. Go back to our Rust code. Open our player, and when we press return, we can use that to swap the palette. So if event, is it confirm? No, it's UI accept. Swap palette. And we probably need the owner in there as well. Right. We can take that away for now. Actually, we're not going to do this on the kinematic body, so we need to get the sprite. We need to import the animated sprite. And there is no such thing as get and cast in GD Native. That's also something I wrote as part of a node extension. So this will get the you know what, we need a path for this one, and that's called, I think it's just called animated sprite. In let's have a look. Animated sprite, or we can call it player sprite. There we go. Right. Okay, and we're going to unwrap this. There's going to be a lot of unwrap while we're setting this up. And what are we missing here? There's no such thing, so we need to add our input event extension. And once we have that, we can now call a function to change or set a shader parameter. We just have to be aware that these parameters, as with everything else, here is case sensitive. So the first thing we're going to do now is create the palette. You know what? We're going to do color texture instead. That returns the text. We can return option texture. We return none. And then our animator sprite is going to have to go down to a canvas item, or up to a canvas item. So canvas to canvas item. This is going to be an unsafe function. Ew, what's this complaining about? All right, we need to add texture. There we go. I don't want to format that just yet. And this is an unsafe function. You know what, we're going to do this. We're going to call this whole thing unsafe. It's a little bit messy to do, a little bit naughty, but we can get away with it for this. There we go. And then we need to get our material. And that probably is something we need to unwrap as well. And now we need to, this is just a standard material. We need to cast this to a shader material. And we're gonna unwrap that too. But not unwarp it, that's not a thing. Let's see, this is a shader material we need in there as well. Okay, and then we are going to get the new texture. So we unwrap that again, and then shader mat dot set. You know what? We're gonna look at the docs for shader material. And something about get shader parameter. Set shader param. There we go. Set shader param. And that needs to be mutable. And we need, again, here comes a Godot string. And what do we call this? We call this palette. Which, if we look in our shader code, it's this one. This is our shader parameter, and it's named palette. And we're going to pass it the palette. And we call into, because as you can see from the method signature, it takes a variant. So we're converting our texture into a variant. And let's see if this works. Okay, no, that ain't right. All right, okay. Another into. Okay, so far so good. But now we're unwrapping something we know is none, and that's not gonna work. Swap color, and let's run this, and we need to import that as well. And this is something that can be a little bit frustrating. Okay, so if we now run this, if I press return, it should swap the color, but it doesn't. Okay, it's broken because we're unwrapping a none here. Actually, this was never called, so I have probably done something else wrong here. Let's go. Let's do a bit of text debugging. Okay, so none of that has happened. And you know what? I haven't actually assigned the player struct to the player node, and I'm sure some of you were sitting there going, "Come on, man!" But these things are easy enough to miss. And let's go and fix that. So we have a player sprite. Let's assign a native script player. And again, we need to load the gdnlib. So if I hit F6 now, there we go. Okay, right, and we can even see like Rust panics and all of these things happening here. But here we can see our unhandled input, swap color, unhandled input. But I can do this all day long, and it doesn't crash. And you might not necessarily be aware of what's wrong, because all you see here is okay. There's no player sprite. Hang on a second. That's is that an unrelated error, perhaps? Let's clear this and run this again. Alright, there's no player sprite. Oh, okay, right. I'm sorry, I'm being a clot. So we're going to remove, oh, come on, remove that and add it to the correct node. Create, load the library. Okay, right, so that was a little bit stupid, but let's see if this works. Okay, there we go, and there's no more input errors. Okay, we can see the Rust errors here, that something is panicking, but we can't see anything in here. So if you're running this without the terminal output, then you might not know that something is broken in your code, because it would just keep running regardless. Okay, I ran out of batteries, but we're back. So we want to fix that. So instead of having this unwrap here, we will, and let's take that away too. We will not return an option texture. We'll return a texture. And now the code's gonna break, because we're not returning a texture. So we're gonna do a couple of things. We're gonna create an image. We're gonna set various pixels. Create image texture and return the texture. Okay, so let's get started with that. So create a new image, and if we look at the documentation for image, we have a new function that returns an image. And then we have the actual create function, and we're going to call that now. Text mutable self, we're going to do 256 pixels wide and 1 pixel high. We don't need to use bitmaps, and the format's going to be image format RGB A8. Okay. And then we're going to call set pixel, which takes X, Y, and a color, which means we need to include the color here. So the pixel is going to be 0, 0, and the color can be red. Should be red. Okay, so that creates sets the first pixel to red, and then we can create the texture. So we want the image texture documentation, and we'll probably do a new there, and then we can call create from image, which takes an option image. Okay, right. So image texture create from image, pass in the image. Do we need to pass in anything else? Yes, we need to pass in some flags. Okay, so let's look. Let's go to the Godot documentation, and let's see Godot docs image texture. No, not importing textures. And not 2.1 either. Okay. Right, bear with me a second. Alright, let's get rid of all of this, and we want the image texture. And there we go. And we have create from image here. Right, that's it. Okay, so I've looked this up, and there are flags that we need to set, or rather flags that we don't want to set, and I'll tell you why. Because these flags, which defaults to 7, which will include mip maps, which we don't care about, repeat, which we don't care about, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 7, and 7, okay, and then the filter. And the filter is the thing that we definitely don't want, because the filter tries to make the pixels smooth when you zoom into the whole thing, and that's definitely not something we want. Okay, so we can set the flags to 0 in that case. So now we created an image texture. We filled the image texture with data from the image, and then we're going to return the image texture to texture, I think. And okay, that seemed to have worked. Okay, so if we set the first, second, and third, we do them as well. We can do them as RGB. There we go. And there's something about set pixels doesn't quite look right, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Okay. So now, if we run this, we can't see anything. This is way too small. So let's do our project settings. To window. Let's change that. Let's scale this thing down drastically. Let's divide by 4. Okay. And let's set some stretch mode here to 2D. We don't care about the aspect ratio for now. So now if I run this, it should be a little bit bigger. Okay, well, he's not quite visible, so let's move this guy. And we do that because we don't want to move anything else. We don't want to accidentally move any of the children, rather. So there we go. Let's see if we run this. There he is. There he is. Okay, if I press return, he disappeared. And here's the set pixel. Image must be locked with lock before using. Okay, set pixel. Okay, great. So we're going to do an image lock, and then we need to do an image unlock, presumably. Hey, there we go. Right, now that is looking pretty good. I mean, subjectively. So he is now swapping colors when we hit return. I see, it was a warning there. Font oversampling. Okay, we don't worry about that. We don't even have any text in the game right now. Okay, so we can delete that, and we can go down here and look at this thing. Okay, so now we actually have a Rust project running, and we have a swappable color palette. So and some great looking glitches there. And yeah, I think we're gonna stop here for now, and I think I'm going to do a I think I'm going to, for my next video, I'm going to add an ECS and make the character selectable, so we can select the character and move them around on the screen. Okay, that's it for now.